for that to go on. Why would you fight him so fast? But there's definitely something to the endocrine disrupting chemicals.
Depends on the hormones that are associated with the foods that you're eating. And that's the real key.
Oh boy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited about this one today. So I managed to steal a little bit of time from Dr. Carl Nadolski. Now I'm going to kick it to him for his official introduction and all the qualifications, but he's a board certified endocrinologist, an absolute powerhouse at dispelling BS on social media. Dr. Carl, how are you? Can you introduce yourself?
Doing all right. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm board certified in endocrinology, diabetes, metabolism, diplomat of the American Board of Obesity Medicine. Practice general endocrinology and obesity medicine in West Michigan, and try to at least do my part to help stop the spread of misinformation, I guess.
Which is a full-time job. And that's one of the things we were talking about a little bit before camera is, I've got my biggest following these days on TikTok. And while social media, is always a bit of a war zone of both good and bad information, TikTok, I think, amplifies that because of, the short form content of it. How's your experience been on social media and getting more involved on that as a doctor and an endocrinologist?
So, I think for the most part, it's pretty good. I have historically tried to provide content that's, both reasonable for the types of patients that I would see, and also for other physicians or other clinicians that might follow me for whatever reason. My younger brother is a family practice, does obesity. He's all Mr. Social Media. I mean, that's like literally his job. We joke around about it, his being a memeologist. He figured out how to make memes, make them funny. He's also, he pushes the limits a little bit. He doesn't have to worry about getting fired, so he can do some funny stuff. But yeah, TikTok is the area. Boy, I've dabbled with it, and it's just it's kind of a dumpster fire. I've called it.
Your brother Spencer's obviously done very well with being able to find that sweet spot of informational content and challenging a lot of those the BS narratives that are pushed. I did always wonder about why he was a little bit more outspoken or a little bit more controversial than a lot of doctors, but if he's if he's professional memeologist at this point, then that makes sense as well. Look, we're pretty much going to jump into it today because I've scoured the depths of said dumpster fire to give hopefully people at home a little bit of a taste of what exactly is nutrition, social media, and hopefully we can provide some clarity to anyone watching this and hopefully get a few people who may have otherwise listened to some of this, I'm sure, well-intentioned advice. Is there anything else you want to add, or are you just excited to jump into the dumpster fire with me?
Yeah, let's try it.
One secret hormone you cannot lose weight with. Now, when this hormone is elevated in your body, it's impossible for you to lose weight. This hormone is caused by short-term and long-term stress. When this hormone is elevated in your body for long periods of time, it is detrimental to your health. But this hormone is super important, and it is the very reason for your fight or flight response, and much, much more. Have you guessed what it is yet? Cortisol. This is your stress hormone, which actually stores fat when in your system. Now, if you want more content just like this, you know what to do. Give me that follow.
Oh boy.
Straight into it. Mate, what's your immediate reaction to these kind of videos?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I knew what he was getting at. I knew he was going to say cortisol. His little quiz, I know that's the deal. So the reality, though, is, yeah, of course, there's a little truth in everything, right? So cortisol is a very important hormone, and it doesn't make it impossible to lose weight. That's just blatantly just false. However, it does certainly play a role in a lot of things we do. It is part of our fight and flight and all that stuff. There are serious medical conditions that result in too much cortisol: pituitary tumors, adrenal tumors. The most common being medication, taking too much of a cortisol type medicine, steroids, prednisone, dexamethasone, these types of medicines, even inhaled or even topical steroids for what it's worth. It's really bad for our metabolism per se. It's really bad for like diabetes. It's bad for our bones. It probably does reduce our metabolic rate a little bit. It certainly increases appetite, and it preferentially stores our adipose tissue in our belly, which is bad for cardiometabolic disease, the diabetes type physiology. While chronic stress and all these things, it does cause elevated levels of cortisol, and it does to some degree probably play a role in what works against people. But what he's saying is just blatantly false. I mean, it doesn't prevent anybody from losing weight. The point is, his point is that would be reasonable, would be to say, hey, we have to work on stress reduction, better sleep, better diet, exercise habits, not necessarily to reduce our cortisol per se, because that's not really the pathophysiological problem. Now, if you have a true symptoms of too much cortisol, rounding redness of your face, big purple stretch marks, weakening of your legs, worsening muscle, developing abdominal obesity, that needs to be checked out by an endocrinologist.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think that's something that, I find so much when it comes to these kinds of things is, right, like, we're going to talk a lot about hormones today. And obviously they play a massive role in the body. And we're going to particularly dive into it from a fat loss and a nutrition standpoint. But I think one of the things that I always see with these kinds of videos that immediately jumps out as a red flag to me, the symptoms you're talking about, there are quite severe symptoms, right? Or people, portraying this kind of information rely on first convincing you that you have a problem, right? They're not talking about these purple stretch marks, or I'm sorry, one of the symptoms that you mentioned, right? They're talking about, are you having trouble losing weight? Are you feeling stressed? Like, it's preying on those much more minor things that are part of everyday life, right?
Yep, absolutely.
What does actually trigger cortisol? And for the average person, right? For the average person who's not, who doesn't have one of these kinds of conditions, do they need to worry about cortisol? Is that actually going to be a factor at all in your weight loss protocol?
No, they don't need to worry about cortisol per se at all. But they do need to, in the grand scheme of things, focus on good stress reduction. Like I said, mindfulness. Sleep is very important. Sleep is kind of the unsung hero of lifestyle medicine, diet, exercise, sleep optimization, but it all has to be personalized. Sleep-wake cycle stuff is hard, and it probably does have, some to do with cortisol. I know, for example, when we're training in medicine and we're doing 36-hour shifts and we're up in the middle of the night getting called, and your cortisol's up. I mean, you can feel it. And if the night nurses have donuts around, boy, it's hard to deny those. But what's the treatment for that? It's not that you have a cortisol problem. That's the appropriate physiologic mechanism to what's going on in your body.
The other thing to exactly to that point is, like, a lot of people, when they are working, medicine's a great example where you're being worked to the bone. Your stress goes up, but a lot of cases, that then results in weight loss if people aren't looking after themselves well, and they're in a high stress environment and lifestyle. Then a lot of times, if you're skipping meal, you're going to lose weight, right? We don't see cortisol kind of having that negative effect on weight loss.
Anorexia causes high levels of cortisol. So people who don't eat, don't have enough body mass, they obviously don't have a problem losing weight because they need to actually gain weight. They have huge levels of cortisol to some degree to try to, part of that's appropriate physiology.
Cool. That's a good example, isn't it? And as soon as you can pull up an example like that, right, it gets very hard to then to buy into these myths as well. Awesome. All right, so we're going to jump into number 2. 3, 2, 1.
Do you remember when you were a kid and you could eat whatever you wanted and you never gained any weight? It's because our thyroid, what controls our metabolism, was working better. It had more nutrients. So if you want to speed that little thing up, we're going to give it some nutrients. Selenium, make sure it's from organic mustard seed. Kelp, high in iodine, magnesium, calcium, but if you have hyper or Hashimoto's, you don't want to do this quite yet. Stabilized rice bran.
There's a lot to go through in these. I just want to know what your reaction is when you see these kind of videos, and what you would like to tell people who might be looking in the comments to get some validation on whether or not this is real advice.
Well, I mean, first of all, people who are struggling with weight and a lot of other symptoms, they're probably going to get their thyroid screened, first of all. It's not an uncommon disorder. In the United States, the most common cause of actual hypothyroidism, low thyroid hormone, which is our main metabolism hormone, would be an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's. It's not uncommon. So it gets screened a lot. And there are a bunch of other causes, but those are, a little bit more rare. So then this kind of goes back to some of what she says, of course, is not really wrong exactly. But, it's not one of those things where as we get older, our thyroid doesn't work. No, if your thyroid doesn't work, there's something going on there. And in fact, as patients get into their really older years, thyroid function does tend to kind of slow down a little bit. And it actually turns out that that's probably a good thing, because those levels are associated with better outcomes, like death, longevity stuff. So then she starts to get into, of course, she's pushing supplements like that always are. Now, selenium that she mentioned is an important mineral for thyroid function. So in the United States, we should not be deficient in selenium. I usually tell people to eat some nuts and seeds anyways for all sorts of varieties of nutritional health aspects, cardiometabolic health. And Brazil nuts are a famous source of selenium. However, there are some studies, especially from places outside the United States, probably that have some selenium deficiency, where selenium supplementation helps with the autoimmune disorders of thyroid dysfunction. So like with Graves', which is actually too much thyroid hormone, so that's not out of the realm of, thyroids, but not for what she's talking about. And then she starts talking about kelp iodine. We should not be iodine deficient. We very rarely think about that. I had one patient the other day, and I have about one a year, where they've been doing real organic, too strict of dietary efforts that are probably not actually healthy, and they're only doing sea salt or whatever, and they might have iodine deficiency. Everywhere else in the world, iodine deficiency is the leading cause of hypothyroidism, but it shouldn't be in the United States, where we iodize our salt. And she of iodine can cause one way or the other. It can actually stop your thyroid from functioning. Okay, so there's a mechanism where it kind of says, whoa, this is too much, because that's like the key ingredient for making thyroid hormone, and it kind of shuts down. We even use high doses of potassium iodide to emergently shut down too much thyroid. And then she's right. On the other hand, it can lead to goiter or hyperthyroidism if too much. But I would tell people just to not do that. If there's really a risk of having iodine deficiency, just have reasonable diet. Prenatal vitamins, make sure that there's enough iodine, because that's very important for pregnancy. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, she's just, all these guys, they take a little bit of legitimate science that's out there, and then they make stuff up for what, trying to sell something, marketing, whatever it is, but unnecessary anxiety, unnecessary cost for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think, that, like I said, unnecessary anxiety is one of the biggest things that I make content a lot of the time to try and combat that, because all of these people talking about, you must avoid this, or you must supplement with that, or X, Y, Z will happen. They are also the same people, telling you to live a low stress, relaxed life and just calm down, right? But then you're spending all your leftover money on supplements, or freaking out about whether or not your salt's sea salt or Celtic sea salt or Himalayan sea salt, right?
Yeah, no, it's very ironic. It's ironic because these are the type of people that say we over-medicalize things, but they're literally over-medicalizing it. And so, we don't necessarily want to make everyone think they have a thyroid disorder when they don't. And, we can check it. And, just because they want people to have a thyroid disorder to sell something doesn't mean they really do. And ironically, it's not very holistic. You get caught up with one thing. We need to have our minds open to everything else going on, not just the thyroid.
Absolutely. And it comes back to that ironic statement, that your doctor, yes, if they think it's necessary, will give you medication, but they're also not trying to sell you something, right? Like all of these people that we see are trying to sell a program or a supplement or something. As well-intentioned as they may be, it is often the antithesis of a holistic approach, right? So what you're saying is, in general, if you do see one of these videos and think that something may actually apply, always go see your doctor first.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yes.
It's important to clarify as much as possible. Hopefully it'll sink in. We're going to jump into number 3. Now, I know that you've seen this one, so I'm going to let you decide when you've seen enough.
Okay.
Number of calories, it's what your body does with those calories. Because if you take 100 calories, if you eat a cookie, for example, and you take 100 calories, your body has a decision to make. Do I store that as body fat, or do I burn it for energy and, say, increase body heat generation, for example? And that's the basal metabolic rate. That's the number of calories that your body uses in a day. So which your body does. So for that same 100 calories, you can either become fatter or you can have a bit more energy during the day. And which one your body does really depends on the hormones that are associated with the foods that you're eating. And that's the real key, because if you simply cut calories, and this is the way that, I was taught.
I cut that one off on the recording because I was like, you know what, we've probably seen enough. All right, talk us through that. What's your kind of thoughts on this whole it's more hormones than anything else kind of theory?
Well, first of all, that's Jason Fung, who, by the way, he's a nephrologist. He's not an endocrinologist, but he has made tons of money with his, he's sort of glommed onto the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity with, journalists like Taubes and these guys. And he really pushes the fasting stuff, which is fine, and we have data to show that different varieties of intermittent fasting and time restricted feeding and all sorts of these ways do as well, not really any better than straightforward, energy restricted caloric deficits. But it's more about the why. It goes back to this, they're trying to sell something. Well, obviously he's trying to sell books, and he's done very, very well, better than any of us are going to do by selling books as a nephrologist about hormones and weight loss. And it's all about just pushing the fasting stuff. So it's not exactly true. We actually have a very complex hormonal orchestra of our body that regulates our energy balance, drives appetite, controls metabolism to some degree. People are now familiar with the term leptin. That's our fat cell hormone that's been made famous, and it is very important. And everyone's a little bit different, and it works up in the brain and our appetite metabolism centers and our intestine hormones, including insulin, by the way, which is what he gloms onto, that insulin stuff. But actually stomach hormones, ghrelin, our intestine hormones, GLP, GIP, all these things, CCK, that play a huge role with the brain hormones that really control our appetite metabolism. Ironically, insulin, technically, when it's been studied, is actually more of a satiety hormone. But what they try to say is that, if you eat carbs, your insulin goes up, makes you hungry, and you end up eating more. They've actually had to move the goalposts a little bit to try to keep that model going. And it's absolutely seemingly definitive that when we change processed, refined foods to more whole foods, we automatically eat less energy, lower energy, leading to weight loss. But it still ends up being the caloric intake in general. Now, we can argue that protein might be the one macronutrient that has a little bit more of a, we'll call it a metabolic advantage, but even that gets into the weeds. I mean, there are plenty of studies that show people have lost weight on a low fat, high carb diet, studies that show low carb, high fat diets. And like I said, when we change refined foods to whole foods, it kind of automatically does both. The fiber, the other nutrient milieu seems to maybe affect some of those hormones more to help maybe improve our satiety, our appetite, and control how much energy we're taking in. So, again, he's taking some science, to some degree misinterpreting the actual physiology of it a little bit to try to push his method and make money. And the irony is that he doesn't need to do that because his method is an option. I just made a post, I think it was just yesterday, how you can, we don't have to be stuck to one dietary evangelical method. We can cut carbs, we can cut fat. We should probably move from refined processed foods to whole foods. We can interchange that with some intermittent fasting or some time restricted feeding. I would prefer to push a little bit more of a Mediterranean pattern, the olive oil, fish, nuts, seeds for the cardiometabolic health. But all these things are not mutually exclusive.
And that is one thing that we've seen across these videos. And I didn't mean this to be the case, but I just picked random videos, right? But again, maybe I'll give them some credit and say it's a 15-second TikTok, right? You've got to really narrow things down. But even in having this conversation with you, and anyone who A, thinks critically, but B, is an actual professional in their field, right? An unbiased professional, is always open to discussing the nuance, right? And even you couldn't say protein has a metabolic advantage. It didn't sit right with you. You still needed to add a caveat around, but also it's not a super thing, right? Whereas these people have no issues getting on there and saying, oh, if you eat protein, your metabolic rate will go up 700%, or you'll do you should always, in my experience, or at least my personal kind of motto is always listen to people who are willing to leave themselves open for room for interpretation, right? To have some nuance in that conversation.
Sure, absolutely. And I can tell you there are things that we thought 15 years ago got proved wrong. We thought eating more frequently was better. We thought it was stoking the fire, improving metabolism. My grandpa told us, you guys are crazy. And it turned out he was right. We were wrong because the studies proved us wrong. So, it's all part of it. And in fact, the whole fasting thing, meeting has been upgraded. The whole fasting thing, I would have sworn years ago that was wrong, skipping breakfast, whatever, because the observational studies showed that. Interventional trials show, oh, okay, this is reasonable. We can do it, and it can be part of a plan, and it works. Not any better, really, but it works as an option for somebody.
And even in the fitness side of things, we're going through this really interesting, I think one of my friends has called it the bro renaissance, where, we are actually starting to see these studies now kind of reconfirming things that the bros used to do anecdotally ages ago. And when it comes to training and how hard you're pushing in training and whether or not you can actually specifically target certain insertions of the muscles, and always, as always, there's more nuance than when the bros were necessarily doing it. So that's not to say the old logic works, and I'm sure your grandpa was doing some other, they probably had cigarettes and cocaine in medicine in those days. So not to say everything works, but these things do come in cycles, and it's actually a credit to science, the scientific method, that these things keep coming back and reanalyzing and finding new data.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm actually really excited for this fourth one here. So I'm excited to hear your take on this, but we'll kick off when you're ready.
All right.
I have a question for all the doctors out there, maybe specifically the endocrinologist. What is causing the average testosterone in our generation to be so much lower than previous generations? So for me, I'm an online bodybuilding coach, and I do a bunch of phone consultations every day. Out of the last 20 phone consultations, not a single person had testosterone over 400. Which seems kind of odd when my grandparents, my dad, all their testosterone levels are in the 500 to 700 range, and they're 40 and 50 years old. But all the phone consultations, all the blood work that I've seen for people under 25, they're all in the 200, 300, 400. What is causing that change? I don't know if it's the food, the environment. It has to be something causing this. Maybe that's why our generation is so beta and soft compared to other generations, but who knows? Let me know what you guys think.
That's not bad. I mean, first of all, he doesn't sound like he's trying to be a quack or anything. He's asking not an unreasonable question with a lot of complex answers. That's pretty legit. No, he's just saying, hey, what the heck's going on? Now, I don't know about where he's getting his data, like, his dad and his grandpa had these levels and whatever. So first of all, testosterone levels are really variable from person to person across the board. We have fairly decent, recent, harmonized levels for all the studies that really show, okay, this is where it should be normal, healthy levels. And it does matter how it's checked. illness, other stuff going on in life. It should be done first thing in the morning, empty stomach, all that stuff. First of all, we confirm it. And then we find out why. Is this truly low? Especially, he's talking about relatively young adult males who should not have low testosterone. And really, nobody should. And this could take forever to talk about, but are guys just generally with lower testosterone now? And there's a multitude of potential factors. He might not be wrong. And it's an interesting thought. And I don't know that studies confirm it right now, but there is a thought of this. And so we have higher obesity rates, right? So that's part of what I do, right? We have a huge problem with obesity. Obesity can cause a functional hypogonadism itself. So it kind of just suppresses the whole axis. With obesity, especially, is sleep apnea. So sleep apnea does the same thing. And so then it's like all part of the problem. Also with obesity is insulin resistance, especially. So if people have insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, they actually make more of something called sex hormone binding globulin. So total testosterone might actually look lower, but they might have lower levels of sex hormone binding globulin because of insulin resistance. So actually their testosterone levels might be actually pretty normal. They're free testosterone. That's why I said I like to calculate it. There are methods to measure it. So that's one sort of whole mantra. Another one would be medications. People are on more medications. It seems like some medications can, cause some problems. By the way, we talked earlier about steroids, not anabolic steroids, but that too. But like prednisone, like the stress steroids, those things can certainly suppress, if you have Cushing's, like we were talking about earlier, that makes your testosterone low for sure. Maybe there are more guys doing anabolic steroids, but that's probably not what he's talking about. But that obviously can cause low testosterone. And then one other thing that is a big talk and is being researched, and I'm not so sure what to do about it, is something called endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so this is a whole big area of research and concern, plastics and all these different things. The Endocrine Society has been doing a lot of work for the past decade on these endocrine disrupting chemicals and, trying to advocate for, maybe, I don't know, some government, federal help with it or whatever. But there's a chance that, we may have a problem with some endocrine disrupting chemicals in life. And yeah, people might have slightly lower endocrine function, and that could include testosterone. So between all those things, he may not be that wrong.
So I actually know his name's Cody. He's one of who I would put, one of the good quality creators on TikTok. He's a friend of mine, and like I said, he's very switched on. He posts about some good stuff. I know he does predominantly work with bodybuilders, and I'm not sure what their kind of status of, whether they're tested or untested athletes. But I think this in particular was referring to people who are coming in, as natural athletes. So I guess and a lot of
one other thing though. So speaking of that, especially if they are natural athletes, bodybuilders, just like obesity can cause a functional hypogonadism, and this will get back to the leptin we mentioned earlier, but being really, really lean. So like a natural bodybuilder getting really lean. I was a wrestler. We probably all had hypogonadism like when we wrestled, ironically, which obviously shows you it's not a huge problem. But I guarantee you check us all when we're really lean, testosterone levels are lower. That's probably why pro bodybuilders on steroids do better with what they do. That's not recommended for anybody watching this, obviously. But and that's again part of normal physiology.
Also, like you were touching on there, also an athlete on steroids, then we're also looking at potentially sleep apnea being a cause at the top end, like you were talking about. So the last question I kind of have on that, because obviously, like you said, it is a massive topic. What is your kind of thoughts then around? Well, I mean, if these guys, if what he's seeing is true, and maybe it's just the population he's dealing with, but if what he's seeing is true. Do you think there's going to be functional implications of that? Like, are these guys really going to be at risk of not putting on as much muscle, or of potentially reproductive issues long term? Can you speculate, or?
That's hard to say. I mean, if they're, obviously if someone really has symptoms and there's a real concern, that again, that kind of goes back to, hey, they need to come and see someone like us, because, one out of, 20 guys who's going in trying to do stuff, they might actually have a real problem, like pituitary hypothalamus testicular problem with hypogonadism. They might need real medical evaluation. Otherwise, I think, it's important to, again, go back to the lifestyle stuff. Make sure they're doing really well with their diet, exercise, sleep, especially in this. Talk about their body composition. I see a lot of patients with obesity-induced hypogonadism, low testosterone. We treat their obesity and we resolve it most of the time. Sometimes they do need testosterone therapy or something else, especially if we're trying to preserve their fertility. Now, yeah, if it's an endocrine disrupting situation and it's just eking in there at this point and has the potential to get worse, yeah, I mean, yeah, there are some bigger scale potential implications that are real, not just numbers in the lab. I mean, fertility stuff, cancers and stuff like that. So yeah, there's some implications there for sure. But again, yeah, that's getting a little out of my wheelhouse. I always refer people to the Endocrine Society. There's at least a 2015 statement on it. And then if you just Google that, you can kind of read what they've done, what they talk about, some stuff they're trying to do. There's no definitive guideline though on it, nothing saying, hey, you got to do this. It's kind of like, well, maybe reduce our risk a little bit from exposures for now. Yeah.
There's a lot of people talking about, plastics, because I think that's the one that's kind of been more famously brought up. And that was the one, yeah, it was interesting to get your take on that, because I know I'm so hesitant. Well, the reason I'm hesitant as well, because I've also been that person that gave out advice like that, that said avoid plastics at all costs, whereas now I like to back up my claims a little bit more, because I've learned that's a better way to do things. But it is interesting to hear that you talk about that, and again, that nuance of any of these lifestyle interventions, hey, if you want to give them a crack, they're probably mostly going to have good upsides, but you're also not generally promoting anything quite as extreme as, these people, they'll turn around and say, cut off everything that's, that isn't made of copper or something.
Right. Yeah. But there's definitely something to the endocrine disrupting chemicals. So yeah, I would refer everyone to the Endocrine Society and EDC stuff. It's people who are real into the science of it would be interested in reading it for sure.
Awesome. I know I commented on Cody's video saying I was having a chat to you, and I had a stream of people telling me to link the video once it was done. So they'll be looking for this one. All right, we're gonna kick to the last one. There's a few really good ones in there, but we'll save it for next time. We're gonna jump to number 7.
Okay.
And 3, 2, 1.
God. All right. Oh,
I thought I'd better save the best one for last.
God, I can't wait for that to go on. God, what an idiot. I love it. I could get away with it. I would be fired so fast.
Speaking of pushing the boundaries a little bit, for anyone watching at home, that's Spencer Nadolski, that's Carl's brother. Can you just talk a little bit about, again, what your kind of experience has been like trying to convey these things on social media? How do you think the social media landscape is going? What direction are we heading? Is it a power for good? Is it a power for evil? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it has the potential to be a power for good. I know doctors, researchers, scientists, I think have been late to the game. Spencer, he's my little brother. I'm a little bit older. I kind of missed maybe some of the technology. He's really good he's always been good at that stuff. So he was able to really get into it, figure it out, do the research, kind of do those things, and I've tried to, kind of keep up the best I can to provide, another voice. But yeah, the problem is that the people needing to market, I think, get there first, and they just flood the social media with misinformation. So I think to some degree, Facebook, Instagram, some of these other things have caught up, and there are a lot of scientists. I mean, and there are other endocrinologists. We have a little Facebook group, and people are trying to, get their stuff out there. It's also not as fun. Our stuff, real stuff is not as sexy. you know. Hormones are sexy. That's why people like to talk about them, right? But talking about them in a real way isn't as cool, I guess. And yeah, for whatever reason, TikTok, there must be some selection bias, and I don't want to dog the people that watch TikTok, but for whatever reason, there's more information there, and I think it's because the people that need to market whatever they're trying to sell got there first, because it's an obviously good arena, platform for marketing. And so I think we need to catch up. We need more doctors and scientists that are just kind of helping dispel myths and talk about what's right to be out there, to help people feel like they have trusted sources. But there's also a problem with trust in the world right now. Unfortunately, people for some reason don't trust science, at least some people. We have our own political stuff going on here with that. So, we just got to do the best we can and not be, we can't be derogatory. We can't talk down, can't be condescending. That doesn't help. And sometimes we do, right? I mean, I know I've done it, because sometimes it just makes me mad, because I feel like people are preying on the vulnerable, and, we just got to do better.
Absolutely, and one of the things that, especially on TikTok, I think the format around the duets and the stitches, and that kind of back and forth conversation is what allowed TikTok to really take off, right? And the reaction videos, the stuff like this, is what allowed it to take on kind of a life of its own. I try and convince myself that is going to eventually lead down a good path. Because right now it's also like TikTok is also a like you said, a dumpster fire of bullying, of cyberbullying, right? Because it's easy content to do, is just to duet someone else's video and be condescending, be arrogant, whatever it is, right? And I do my best to try and avoid that kind of content, but like you said, sometimes it is hard. Or when you see someone making these videos, putting out blatantly bad information, I like to convince myself that being able to see someone immediately contradict information is at least going to make us think twice before we see the initial video. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's just going to become more of a celebrity game than it is about the science. But at least my little community on TikTok, and I've got my fair share of hate as well, but at least my little community is a surprisingly, big pocket of people who are watching these videos with a critical eye. And it's why every time I get tagged in a video and someone tells me to react to it, it gives me a little bit more confidence that maybe they're not just taking on the information. So, so look, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. I'm going to take the take-home message of we need more doctors being memeologists. Thank you. Where can people find more about you? Where can people follow you on the social media?
So yeah, Dr. Carl Nadolski, Facebook at Dr. Carl Nadolski, Instagram, TikTok. We do have a www.docswholift.com that Spencer kind of left for me to update all the time. And again, I'm not the most I don't have a lot of time to do it, but once in a while we put some stuff on there. Yeah, we have some real publications that come out here and there once in a while. So yeah, we'll let you know.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We'll see how this video goes. Hopefully we can have you back on, because I'm sure there'll be another plethora of people blaming hormones for everything.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
And that's all we've got for today with Dr. Carl Nadolski. Guys, I really like making this kind of long form content where we can dive into some of the nuances of these topics. The problem with that is that a lot of people on social media are not interested in watching videos that are this long. So if you've made it this far, congratulations, you get a gold star, you get a promotion. But it would mean the world to me if you can hit like, subscribe, drop a comment. I mean, it wasn't until I started making content on YouTube that I realized how many times I would watch a whole video, really enjoy it, and then not hit the like button. Now that I'm making content, I realize how big that is for the creator. So I really put in effort to do it. If you guys have made it this far, you're absolute legends. Hopefully you can hit that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That's it, that's my little plug. As always, appreciate you guys, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks, bye.